tuning prisms of the Add Affix ability from the Horadric cube are going to allow us to target the categories of each individual affix of our gear. As it stands right now in Season 11, the most control we have over our affixes is at the mercy of the RNG at the Occultist. We can pick one affix to reroll, and depending on which stat we're looking for, we could be here for 15 minutes. Because of that, magic and rare items now have the potential to evolve into something more useful with a linear progression system, rather than just being meaningless salvage white noise. Not only is this going to affect the gear itself, but it's going to affect the lower difficulty tiers that drop them, breathing more life into these difficulties. In a minute, we'll take a look at where Sanctification is likely to return in game. At first, I thought recycling uniques meant that we were going to take 3 uniques of the same type, 3 banished talismans, and upgrade it into a guaranteed better roll of that unique. After taking a closer look, it's pretty obvious that's not the case. It just says a new version of that unique. It doesn't say that it's a better roll. And honestly, that would be too much progression too fast anyway. This gives me another chance to optimize the RNG. It's not as good as a guaranteed better roll, but if I already have a roll that I like and these 3 rolls are worse, then the best choice for me is to then recycle the uniques to maybe get a better roll than the one I already have in slot. Something you sanctified whenever you had a best in slot item, and whether or not your sanctification turned out to be better than your current item. It's the same concept, just on a smaller scale. If we look down here, you can barely see it past the red mist, but there is a modifier called a chaotic reroll. This jumps out to me as the most likely candidate to replace the sanctification mechanic that we currently have in Season 11. It's highly likely that they bring sanctification back for the expansion. If it's not an exact replica of sanctification, a chaotic reroll might refer to randomly modifying one affix on an item, and then it would remain to be seen whether or not they would have a sanctification mechanic for a more rare currency, or on the off chance they just never bring it back again. Transfigure item modifier. Since Path of Exile has proved to be a reliable template for some of the crafting mechanics that Diablo 4 is adopting, seeing as sanctification being the same thing as Avowal, the biggest clues that we have for what Transfigure item is going to be is the color of the text and the name. I had to Google the definition of Transfigure, and it turns out that to change or alter something so that it becomes more beautiful or elevated. In Path of Exile 2, there's currencies such as Exalts or Regal Orbs that add individual affixes, but the word Transfigure seems like overkill for a small mechanic like that. I think the most likely candidate from the Path of Exile lexicon that will translate into the Diablo 4 crafting mechanics would be the Orb of Alchemy. This takes a normal item and transforms it into a rare item with an additional 4 affixes. We know from this modifier right here that we're already going to have a mechanic to upgrade it to legendary. So the most logical step down from that for me is upgrading from normal to rare, or maybe magic to rare. The color of the text is a mixture of green and blue. Blue is a magic item. Maybe that's some kind of play on a lower level item becoming a higher level item. To me, 3-to-1 transmutation seems like a pretty reliable way to farm uniques. We know that from a normal item rarity to a legendary item rarity, there's going to be opportunities for a pretty linear progression of items, given the add affix ability right here down below. So, because we will presumably not be able to modify affixes on uniques, 3-to-1 transmutation, rather than being used to farm legendaries, which theoretically it could be, would be more useful to farm uniques, because we are going to have a way to progress and get legendaries with exactly the affixes that we want, rather than just relying on hopefully getting 2 out of the 3 random drop affixes that we need. But the point being is now we've got a choice when we have a low level drop. We can start tuning it to become buffs for attack speed and or jewelry for resource generation. Or we can take those lower level gears and transmute them together, maybe to make a new unique. It doesn't specify right here if the 3 items will be in the same rarity. You get 3 normals, you make another normal, or if it's going to be like the combining rune system we already have that gets a 15% chance to transmute a rune into a higher rarity. It's unclear from what we already know here about the rarities from 3-to-1 transmutation. This will be especially useful for crafting uniques, because for crafting legendaries, we're already going to have a linear progression system to target farm the categories of affixes that we need. Currently, we have to rely on the RNG of random legendary drops to hopefully get the 2 out of 3 affixes, or 4 now in Season 11, that we need. So I personally will probably revert to the add affix modifier here in the Horadric cube rather than just solely being at the mercy of RNG. The cube from Diablo 3 gives us some pretty obvious clues as to what the rest of these modifiers are. The Amalgamation Modifier immediately seems like the new home for combining runes because runes are socketables and we already can combine gems at the jeweler for better gems. So unless we're going to be getting a new socketable in the expansion, which they have made no mention of, runes may be now combined here at the Amalgamation Modifier of the Horadric cube rather than at the jeweler. Maybe there's some more benefits, maybe you have a higher chance to get a higher rarity, and it also mentions consumables and dungeon keys. And again, they haven't made very much mention of fishing, but I assume there's going to be some consumables involved with fishing that we can then transmute here with the Amalgamation Modifier. Dungeon keys, higher rarities. The only thing that really jumps out to me here, different Nightmare Dungeon sigils to eventually get that Mythic Prankster sigil, if that sigil sticks around. This is cool, but the modifier here that stands out most to me out of all of these is the Add Affix modifier, which turns our item crafting into a more linear progression rather than just relying on the RNG of loot tables or gambling ovals. I think all of this also desperately hinges on the RNG that is going to occur outside of the cube. If we're still littered and spoiled with loot, none of this is going to matter. We need to bring back the drop rates a little bit. Not a lot, but a little bit. There's a sweet spot. Too little drops, we're going to feel like garbage. Too much drops, we're going to get bored. We need to be in the Goldilocks zone of the drop rate. If y'all made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, press that like button. If you like me, subscribe. Peace.